There we go. Perfect. So we have how many people? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people and 5 answers. 10 people. Hello. For anyone who joined late, there is a link to survey. If you could please just go in there, just post your answer. So so that I know what like I should focus on in this revision session. I'll give it a few more minutes. So I hope everything is working. You can see me, you can see my screen, and yep, okay, good. And I am recording, am I? I am, perfect. So I will make the recording available on YouTube after we're done, and I'll send the link to your class rep, and I'll also send it here in this Discord. So for anyone who just joined us, there's a link in the study room chat. It's called Study Room 1, and if you could please answer there, which area of web dev do you find difficult? But I think we have a pretty clear answer here. So yeah, JavaScript is a real pain. So I'm just going to go to the next slide here. So if you refresh the link I sent you there, you can put in like a short, like a single word or 2 words that like kind of describe which area of this module would you like to revise. Is it like events? Is it tables? Is it you know, Ajax? And there should be like a cloud of words here. So it's the same link that I've sent in Study Room 1. Past exam papers, Ajax, yeah. Pers and Sui, table solutions, how you look JS into HTML. Yeah, there's few ways of doing that. You can put in more than one answer, by the way, if there is like few things you'd like to go over. Maybe you should write these down. Yeah, so I think tables is a pretty likely question to come up. It's 50-50. There's a 50-50 chance that tables will come up on the exam. If they do, I'd say do that question. I think you have to do 3 out of 4 questions. So if tables come up, I would like almost most definitely do it, because it's an easy question. The difficulty of the question is that it's usually combined with CSS, and CSS can be a real pain because you have to remember a lot of properties. So a lot of this module and the preparation for it is just remembering all the different properties of CSS and JavaScript as well. So that's like one of the difficult parts. Ajax papers. I can go over papers. I can go over like over them today, or we'll see how it works out. Tables. Link.js into HTML. And Ajax. Ajax is very easy actually. I actually have a very good example that I made for you yesterday. Okay, does anyone have like a problem with like the basics? Should I go over the basics and kind of like general idea of how this all works together? I think in the bar chart before, there was like a lot of people who like didn't entirely understand how it, that said that they said they don't really understand how it all works together. It is somewhat difficult to piece all of the JavaScript and HTML and CSS together. The reason it's such a mess is because they were kind of developed independently of each other. So first we had HTML, And HTML had like a one single purpose, which was to structure a static website, right? So when you go to a website, it has some more or less static structure. These days, it's more dynamic in the industry. General, please. General. I can do some general overview. So there was HTML first, and then they decided, well, HTML is not good enough. We need something to do conditions and to like kind of change things on the fly. And that's when JavaScript came along. So they developed JavaScript, and they kind of tried to link it into HTML, and they did a pretty good job of it. Maybe it doesn't appear like they did a pretty good job of it, but it's actually not half bad. I've seen worse in the history of programming. There's been worse cases of linking stuff together. And they were like, okay, now we have, dynamic behavior thanks to JavaScript, and we have kind of static layout thanks to HTML. And, now we want to decorate our website. I think actually CSS came before JavaScript. So HTML was first, then they wanted to decorate it. So they created CSS, and then they wanted, dynamic behavior, and they created JavaScript. And that's why it's kind of a little bit of a mess, because everything was developed independently of each other. So it can be difficult to piece together. It's getting better now, especially in the last 3 years. There's been some real progress into kind of streamlining JavaScript, and it's going to be it's at a point where it's like a language that's like actually nice to work in. Maybe not at your stage, guys, because it's kind of very basic stuff we're going over here. In your second year, you'll be. So I talked to one of the teachers you'll have next year. His name is Enda Barrett, and he'll be teaching you kind of more advanced web development. It's a really nice module, and you have like a project there, and the project is you have to like write your own website from pretty much scratch, and you'll be working in Vue.js. So someone was asking me in the labs if you'll be working a framework, like if you learn any JS frameworks during this course, CSIT course, and yes, you'll be learning Vue.js next year, which is nice. It's a very popular framework, and there's a lot of job opportunities in Vue.js. Okay, so journal, please. Okay, so let's let me close this. And journal. How journal should I go? How journal should I go? That's a very good question. Okay, so I'll just open the first notes I have here. So this is introduction. Right, so the browsers. Let's do a quick general overview. It should take me hopefully no more than 15 minutes. So it's very important to understand how the code is being executed, because I know you guys are doing C, right, in your programming module. When you write code in C, you compile it, and after you compile it, you execute it in your machine, and it runs directly on your machine. JavaScript works a little bit differently, is because the code does execute on your machine, but it executes inside the browser. So when you make a request to a server for a page, so if I type, let me think, Google. When I type Google, and we go into lots of errors here, and we go here, there's like requests, different requests being made into Google. And one of these requests is to get this page. I wonder if I could find it, maybe. No. So I send a request to the server saying, okay, get me the index page for Google. And the server sends me back a HTML file, a JavaScript file, and CSS file. And those files, they are being interpreted by the browser, and the browser displays the kind of the end result to me. So all the server does after I send a request to it for the page, it just sends the files back. Well, in more advanced JavaScript, there's more going on behind, but at this level, it just sends the files back, and the files are then being executed by the browser. So like all of the code here, it's executing inside the browser. So that's a very important concept to understand. there are three parts to web development. There is HTML, which is just purely for syntax, not for syntax, for structure. So like for example here we have the body, and we have some div which lays out the page, and we have images. The CSS is the styling of the page, so just decoration. So do you want colors? Do you want to move something left or right? And JavaScript is what adds kind of dynamic behavior to our page. So say if someone's 24 years old and we want to say like we have an input with like a date of birth, and then if they are like above certain age, we want to display like different ads, for example, to kind of target them better. And yeah, W3 School is a great resource. You should definitely go to that all the time. I hope that everyone is somewhat familiar with kind of general structure of HTML. If I'm going too quickly or you would like something specific here revised, do let me know. JavaScript variables, so that's the second week. So the way we define JavaScript variables, there are three ways. There's the var keyword, let keyword, and const keyword. If you know how to use let and const, use them. It's good practice. If you don't worry, use var. In the exam doesn't matter. In the exam, you can use whatever you want. I don't think you'll be penalized for it in any way, because technically speaking, either of the approaches is correct. var has some awkward behavior behind the scenes, but nothing you should be concerned about. It doesn't. I can't really think of a scenario that like would apply to you guys. So if you're comfortable with using let and const, I'd say use them because it's better. But if you're not, just use var. And var and let are pretty much interchangeable. So if you want to use these, just use let all the time. It's basically the same thing. The only difference between let and const is that you can't redefine const. So if I open console here and I do const a is equal, let me zoom in, const a is equal to 20. And let's print a, there we go. So we have a 20, and I try to do a is equal to 15 now. I get an error saying that assignment to a constant variable is not possible because we define a as a constant, and when we define a, we assign some value to it, and after that, that value cannot be changed. If we do it with let, so let's do let b is equal 20, and there we go. There we get our 20, and then I want to change b to say 88. I get my b is equal 88, and the same with var, obviously. So, and I can change var if I want as well. So you can see I change as well. So the only difference between const and everything else is when you define it, you need that initial value of something. It can be a string, and then you get the string back, but the thing is you cannot change it. So that's all there is to it. I know there was some confusion around that. Use strict, that's a fairly new thing. I don't think you really have to bother with this on the exam. In general, it's a good practice. In the exam, you don't really care because you'll be writing code on paper. Basic operations, you should know them. If you don't, learn them. They might appear on the exam as a kind of a fairly like a subset of a question when you're asked to do these like as a part of the question, but like they're not the main aspect of the question. Loops. So there's two loops you should know about. There's the while loop and there is the for loop. Obviously, if else. So if is for conditions. And this is the syntax for the for loop. So we define our variable. Don't forget the keyword in front of it. So it's always a variable something is equal to 1. I was writing code yesterday and I forgot that there needs to be a variable here. Technically speaking, you can put anything here. So it can be doesn't have to be var. It can be for let. So let is also a valid like so. So I is equal, and you can use plus equals 1. I think you can. You should be able to. I wonder if this will work inside the console. It does. Nice. And I think you could use const as well, except it might just not work. So like it's a valid use. It's just because it's a constant variable, it won't let you change it. The while loops, so basically they're like conditional loops. You specify conditions inside the while loop and then you execute the while loop for some period of time. The thing is you need an exit condition. So like in this scenario, the exit condition is the I is less than j. Sorry, I is greater. So when I is greater than j, then the loop exits. Okay. Links, hyperlinks. I think we should be all familiar with hyperlinks at this stage. So headings, not really that useful. Basically, they're the same as a paragraph, just kind of change their shape. One thing about headings is they're sometimes interpreted by the browser differently. It's nothing you should worry about. But like a lot of elements in HTML, they don't really change like the appearance of your HTML, but they might kind of change how the browser interprets them. So for example, a heading will be interpreted slightly differently than the rest of the text, even though like the appearance might be very similar. Lists, they're a likely question to come up. So do know lists, know all types of them. So there is the unordered list, and then there is the ordered list. You define them with, I think it's UL, and then li. So li is the list element, if I'm not mistaken. So if you change this to ol, that'll be on under list, and if you change it to, is it? I'm not entirely familiar with the syntax of the list. There we go. Yeah, so it's always li inside, and then you just change the outside element to ul or ol. So ol will be the ordered list, and ol will be the that's also ordered list. I'm not familiar with the list syntax. Let's have a look. HTML lists. So it's a lot of memorizing basically. So ul, li, that's also ordered list. dt is description list. That's new. I've never seen this one before. Nothing you should worry about. Okay, fairly basic stuff here. I think I'm gonna speed up a little bit because it's taking longer time than I expected. Let's have like animations. Is there like anything in particular, any lecture someone would like to go over? If you can type in chat, please. How much is CA worth? Don't know. I don't know. I think it's 2% per assignment, so 20% maybe 10. That's a question for Sam. I'm halfway done with the assignments. I correct assignments 1 to 5, and I'll correct the remaining assignments shortly. I'll start on assignment 6, 7 today. They should be corrected by the end of weekend, and then 8, 9 will be corrected before the exam. Don't know about assignment 10. I might correct it on the day of the exam. I'll try to get all of your assignments corrected before the exam, so that you know what grade you got in them. From what I've seen, most people did fairly well in assignments. There were some mistakes, very common mistakes, like forgetting semicolons, misspelling HTML tags. I wouldn't worry too much about semicolons and misspelling HTML tags in the exam. So in the exam, people will be looking for. So the examiner in your exam will be mostly looking at the logic of your code. So don't worry too much if you miss a semicolon, or like you forgot spelling of some property, or you're not sure if it's, kind of a property. Exam paper 1819, question 3. Okay. You can also type in chat in Discord, by the way. That's right. I'm going to close this now. Windows set timeout. Yeah, Windows set timeout is a good one. I'll go over that. Table solutions. How you link JS, Parse, Ajax, Example, animations. Animations are a very likely question to come up. I'll show you something. Where's the folder here that I've prepared? So I did make some preparation here. I think I'm gonna. So this is the exam from 2018, and note this question. So it's basically animate this block. So you have 2 images and you want to flip it, and there's a set timeout. So you flip it every 5 seconds. Sorry, 5 times per second. That's 2018 paper. Now we go a year back. That's 2017 paper. Note the same question. Slightly different, 20 times per second, and the part D is the last part slightly different, but the question is pretty much the same. And then let's go 1 year back, year 2016. Tables came up, and do note, literally pretty much the exact same question, at least part A, B, C. So timeouts and kind of animations in general, pretty much guaranteed to come up. This was a different module, but like it was still taught by Sam, and it's pretty much the same thing. It was called Next Generation Technologies, but it's pretty much the same as web development. So you can use the past exam papers to prepare. I don't think Sam gave you any past papers on Blackboard to look over. I don't think there are any. I think last year everything was online. I think it was all continuous assessment. So maybe there was no exams. I'm not sure. Yeah, so animation is likely to come up. Timeout likely to come up. Timeout is a tricky one, and I'll just do some examples. If there's anything specific in the notes, do let me know in Discord. You're using them as a base for study. Okay. Yeah, you should. A very good advice. For every exam, just do past papers. I find revising just from notes for exam to be wasteful, because you never know what's going to come up from those notes. Whereas if you go over past papers, like you're guaranteed that like at least 1 or 2 questions will be very similar. Right. I'll go over the papers. I have some examples here that I've made, and I have some any assignments before I move on. Does anyone want to go over assignment solutions? No? Okay. Right. Tables. I didn't go over tables. Tables are very simple and they're very easy to remember. How things link. Yes, I was supposed to explain how to link JS into HTML. I'll go over that first, because everything else is based on that. Tables are very simple. This is how you define a table. Memorize it. Let me open this here. So do pay attention. Do remember that the head row we define with th, and then each next row we define with td, where tr stands for the table row. So like we all define them with table rows, right? So like a single row is tr, but like the cells inside the top row we use th, and every other row for each column we use td. The reason we do that is that like it doesn't really make any difference when you what did I do? When you kind of look at it. except this is in bold. And sometimes some websites, like as I said, some browsers will interpret code differently. So like Chrome might look at this th heading and interpret it one way. Firefox might do it differently. Edge might do it differently, and whatever Apple uses might do it differently. So they're each. So like that's one of the things about JavaScript is it doesn't run on your machine. It runs in the browser, and it's up to the browser to decide how it's going to display your code. So back in the old days, before 2015, different browsers behave differently, especially Internet Explorer, which was the worst browser by far in the history of browsers. And what web developers had to do, they had to write code for one browser and then test it on all other browsers. And when there was like a mistake or like when there was a compatibility issue, they had to implement a fix specifically for that one single browser. So compatibility issues were a real pain. It's not really an issue anymore. Right, so tables, this is how you do tables. You can merge cells. So I think there was a question like that in the papers somewhere. So you should know how to merge cells. Do they show here how to merge cells? If they do not, I will look it up. So HTML merge cells, merge table cells. So you can merge them. You can merge them horizontally. So that's called span. So you define that on the cell, and it will be merged with the next cell, with the cell next to it. So this is the first cell here, and it's being merged with the next cell. Is it? No, wrong. That's wrong. So this is the first cell, and it has a size of 2, and this is the last cell here. And then we have 3 cells for each row. And so this is a size of 3 here. So if we change the call span to 3, then this is 3. And then I think you can do it vertically as well. Yes. So that's row span. And then note that since the span of this first cell here is 2, we're missing the first one in the next row. So this is the next row, and we only have 2 cells. So this one and this one. And we're missing the first one because it's merged. So that's tables. How link JS into HTML? You link JS into HTML with document.getElementById. And if you're, well, that's how you get elements in HTML using HTML elements using JavaScript. And if your JavaScript is external file, you need to import it. You do so in the head tag, always in the head tag. And I actually don't know the syntax for it because I don't have to know, but you guys do. HTML import JS script. And this is the simplest form. Should you add comments for the exam? You can. So one of the issues in the exam is, I'm writing code here and I can just, delete it all and start from scratch. And that's very convenient. That's why we write code in editors. You'll guys be writing code on paper, which I personally think is very stupid. So if you make a mistake, it won't be easily fixable because sometimes like your HTML structure will be all messed up. So if you want, you can like write a comment and kind of try to fix it, saying, this should be nested or something like that. I wouldn't bother with comments. You're not writing like your exam is on paper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Some exams are. I think I had like one single exam that was written on like an actual computer where we were coding on a computer that was Java. I think they don't do that anymore. Everyone got an A, so that was an issue. Yeah, so writing code on paper is a major pain. I gave someone in the labs an advice that you should guys you should sit down with a blank page in front of you and just try and do one question from the papers. because writing writing code on paper is a shock. I remember I sat down in my exam, like your exam, and I wanted to start writing code, but like I had no idea where to start. I didn't have my editor, I didn't have any keys to press, and you know, all of the muscle memory that goes into your fingers, and I had to like write code, and I was super confused. It took me a good 15 minutes to readjust. So do sit down in front of blank page and just kind of give it a shot. Try to do 1 or 2 questions from the papers from memory. So memorizing all of this stuff is a major aspect. You really have to memorize a lot of stuff, like table structure. Like I don't know this. I don't have it memorized because I can look it up. You guys have to memorize it. So tough. It's not easy. There's a lot of memorization to be done. Just make sure you focus on the important parts. So there's a lot of things you don't have to memorize. So like from CSS, I would only focus on positions, left, top styles, background styles, font styles, colors. You can do colors as words, I think, in CSS. You don't have to type in the hex values. So like, you know, this, I think you can just do white in CSS. So it's like color white. I don't know if that's valid CSS, but the idea is you can just write colors. I think there's only one question in the papers that is usually CSS. So know it, but don't focus on it too much. Let's have a look. Past exam papers. Let's have a look at the 2018 one. So we have input divs, no CSS. The second one is also no CSS. The third one is JavaScript, no CSS. Yeah, there's only one question. And you can just skip it because you only have to do 3 out of 4. So 3 questions. So if you don't want to learn CSS, you can probably just not learn it and ignore the question. Could be 2 questions that could come up with CSS this year. You never know. But yeah, you like it's CSS. Learning CSS is a pain. No one really knows CSS. I spent like a year working in web development for a company, working in JavaScript and CSS, and I still don't know either. Like I was paid for programming JavaScript, and I did for a year, and I still wouldn't say I'm confident that I'd be able to kind of code JavaScript all the time from my memory or CSS. Yeah, okay. I went over tables, sorry. I went over how to link JS into HTML, did I? Yeah, so just script and then source. I think it's the same for, is it the same for CSS? HTML, import CSS. It's link. So it is different. I think there was one question that required you to use external CSS and external JavaScript. So should know this. This is fairly easy to remember, script. This one is a little bit harder. We have the style sheet, which is just the type of what we're linking. And then we have href, which is the source from which we're linking. So my style.css. So we're importing this style file, and we're importing the JavaScript file, which is JavaScript, like so. That's how you link the external JavaScript and external CSS files into your HTML document. If they're not linked, and like you try to call a function, do I have any functions here? Like init. So I have an onload init function, and say it's like in this JavaScript file. If you try to call it without it being linked, it will just say function undefined as an error. So yeah. I went over tables. Okay, let's go over some of the examples I made. So let me drag this here. So you guys want to go over Ajax? I did do Ajax yesterday. Ajax. Let's open this. Perfect. Ajax. I guess I didn't answer the comment. The question: should we add comments for the exam? If you want to, and if you have the time, and if you find the space for it on the answer sheet, because as you write code, it will get very messy, and you only have like this much width to work with. So and you have to indent your code like so. Well, you don't really have to, but you want to do that. Otherwise, it will get really messy very quickly. So it's like if you find space somewhere, space for your comment somewhere, you can pop a comment or two. You don't really have to add comments. I don't think I ever did. I think very few people did in my class. The reason for that is like the examiner already knows what they're expecting. They're expecting like a very specific solution, and like they can kind of infer the logic of your solution from the code. Right, Ajax. So the setup I have here, and I'll just go over it very briefly. So in the body, I have an onload event. So I hope everyone is familiar with events. If you're not familiar with events, it's something that gets called when particular conditions are met. So the onload event calls the init function when the particular HTML element has finished loading in the page. So once the body of this page finishes loading, it will call the init method. Obviously there are other events like on mouse over, on mouse up, wheel, move. So this one is when we move a mouse over an element. I'll go over these in more detail in a bit. I really want to focus on Ajax here. Maybe I should zoom out a little bit. I hope the video is good. Can everyone see? Let me preview. It seems okay. So what I want to do here, we have two TXT files. Actually three. We have three TXT files, and what I want to do is load them into my page. And I want to do so using Ajax. Now the reason we use Ajax is because it's asynchronous. What it means is that it can execute independently of everything else going on in our web page. The reason we want that is because our web page runs on a single process. So that means where we're running something, it has to execute line by line. So when we're loading a page, it has to fully load everything line by line, and only after it's done all of that, it will run any JavaScript. Actually, that's not true. JavaScript might run independently. I think it's being optimized. The idea is when you want to make a request to somewhere, it doesn't matter to where, like you're on a web page and you want to send a request for an image. So you went to a web page and that web page wants to load an image from a different web page. It used to be the case that you had to reload the whole web page to make just the single request for a new image. And that was an issue because you ended up reloading the whole page just for like a single request. What Ajax allows us to do is do so without reloading the whole HTML of the page, which was very wasteful. So the way I do it is I have the init function that gets run once the body of this HTML loads. And inside this init function, I have another function called load file. And I pass in the name of the file, which you can see defined here on the left. So we have this lorem ipsum long.txt file. And it has a few hundred lines here of text. And it's passed in as an argument to this function. and we can access this argument in this function. So if I do console.log load file, sorry, just file, and I view the console log here, you can see that this console log prints out the name of the file, which is the argument of this function. So the way we send Ajax request is we define a new object called HTML HTTP request, and this returns an instance of this class. It's actually a class, not an object. It returns an instance of this class that we then save to the X HTTP variable. A class, you don't really need to worry about classes. You just need to know that when you do new class, you get back an instance of the class, which is classes are like templates, and instances are like configuration of those templates. So a car is a template, and then BMW is an instance of car. That's really advanced stuff that you'll be covering, and I lost my text. Unexpected syntax error. There we go. Don't know what I did. Yeah, that's fairly advanced. Classes and objects. Basically memorize this. And then how you send your HTML request or the Ajax request is, first you need to define what happens when the request gets returned. So let me maybe bring back a visualization here. Ajax. Any good images here? No. JavaScript. I think that's what Sam used in his. Right. So yeah, we have our browser here, and it creates a request to the server, and then the server returns some response based on that request back to the browser. And once that response gets returned to the browser, we need to do something with it. And because it's all asynchronous, so it kind of executes independently of everything else going inside our browser, we don't really know when that request is going to come back. And that's an issue, because we want to do something once it gets back to us, and we don't really know when that's going to happen. So what we have to do, we have to define an event, and that event is on ready state change. So this XHTML HTTP object has a built-in status that defines the current return status of the XML request. And once it has completed, we want to print it into our paragraph. Okay, so I'll just go through it line by line. So first we define the objects which will be used to make the request. And then we define, and I know this is very long, don't worry about all of this for now. And then we define what we want to do with it. So once, and let me just replace this so it makes more sense. Once the ready state is 4, so 4 is the request has been finished, and status is 200, so the request was successful. So if the request we sent has finished and the status was successful, we want to take this response. So we want to take the response that we got, and we want to put it inside the paragraph that we have here. So if I go back here, will this not work without? I've changed something that I shouldn't have changed. There we go. And it should also work. Perfect. So don't worry about the this keyword. Right, so what happens here is I'll comment this. What we define here is what should happen when the state of the request is changing. And we can see that, so here is where we send the request. I'll go over this part in a bit. So once we send the request, it has few states. The first state is server connection established. So we can see that when ready state, and let me change all of these to XHTTP. The first one is server connection established. So when the server, when this object that we have here establishes connection to the resource or the server that holds the resource we want to get, and that changes the state to 1. And remember that we're running this event on ready state change. So every time the state of our request changes, we run this function here. So this whole function here gets run every time the state of the request changes. So the first state is state 0. So that's request not initialized. So that's just when we're not doing anything passively. So that's when we just kind of defined this object and we're not making any request. So that's state 0. State 1 is when we've made our request here, and that request begins to establish the connection to like a specific URL. So we can see after run this is the first state we get, server connection established. And then once the connection is established, the server has to receive requests. So once the server receives the request, it will respond with ready state 2. So that's where we get ready state 2. And it says the server receives our request. Ready state 3 is when the server is processing requests. So it's looking for the resource that we've requested. So in this particular scenario, we've requested for this text file here. And 4 is when the request is finished. So the server got our request for a resource, it processed the request, and it returned some resource. And the return value can have 3 statuses. So we have status 403, 404, and 200. So 200 is when the return value of the request was successful. So the server got our request, it processed it, and it found the resource, and now it has sent back the resource back to us, and we can do something with it. 404 is when the resource could not be found. So what we're looking for is this lorem ipsum long.txt file. So if I rename this to say 2, you can see now that what we get is 404. So that means not found. The resource we've requested could not be found. And 403 is forbidden. Forbidden is when we don't have permission to access the resource. That's nothing you should worry about. And so this is what we do when the request kind of changes its states, because there are multiple states to the request. It is a somewhat difficult concept to understand. I'm maybe not doing a very good job of explaining it. It's somewhat advanced. If there is anyone who's confused about this kind of state changing of the request, please do let me know. What you really need to know, like for the exam, this doesn't matter. None of this really matters. I imagine something like handle like behavior for when the request is when the resource is not found could be a small question on the exam, but I really doubt it. It's fairly advanced. So what you really need to memorize is this particular if. So this is what happens when the request you've sent is finished and it was successful. And you can see I've defined here code for handling that. So once the request was finished and it was successful, I assigned the text I got from the server through my Ajax request back to this. Why do I have this P here? There we go. assign this three equals here in the line. Assign this text back to document.getElement by IDP. So back to this paragraph. And this is how we make the request. So first, it's important to remember, first we define what happens when the request is done. Then we send the request. The reason for that, if we send a request, but it doesn't have any behavior to handle the return, the response of it, nothing will happen. At least, I think so. So if I do Control X and put this here, that still works. It shouldn't work, but it works. I think perhaps the browser is smart enough to figure out what I mean, or the object there is doing some extra work in figuring out what I mean, but you shouldn't do that. You should first define the on-state change effect, and then it could be that it's because being run as a single function that all of this kind of gets defined at once. It's weird. It shouldn't work. You live, you learn, I guess. So first, define the on-ready state change. So that's what happens when your request is done and finished, and we assign it back to the paragraph. Then you send it. We send it by defining the request type. So there are 3 types you should remember of requests. There is the get, there is the post, and then there is the lead, I think. There are other requests such as put, update, and so on. No need to worry about them. All you need to know is that get is used for getting resources. So in this example, getting the file on my server. And I'm using this IP here because you can see that I'm accessing this particular page with this IP. So if I copy this IP and type in another txt file here, so fmap.txt, you can see I get back this txt file here because it's accessible through this link. And if I refresh it, if I go to maybe networks, there we go. So you can see when I load this page, I send a request to this URL here using a get method. So I want to get this txt file, and that's the same thing that's happening in here. We're sending a get request to this IP with a file. And this is just a string template, might be a little bit confusing, so I'll rewrite it. This is the same as there we go. So we put the IP and then we attach the file. I imagine it should work without the IP as well. Yeah, seems to. So no need to worry about like putting in any IP like here in your exam. Post is when you're sending something to the server. So if I have an input from the user, so let's do input here. I think the browser will be smart enough to, yeah. If I type in some input here and then I have a function attached here that on key enter or key down, that this is not valid code, but if I like type something here and press enter, and this will run some function that will send that information to the server, that's when we use post. So we would do post, and then we would grab the value of this input here, and we would send it as an argument here. So post is for sending to the server, get is for grabbing things from the server. I don't think you'll be asked to do any post. I think you're only in the exam you'll only be asked about getting things, because I can't really imagine how you would. I can't really imagine a question when someone would ask you about sending things to the server. So I think there was some Ajax, maybe not this year, maybe the year before that. Nope. Also not. I think there was like an Ajax question, but I can't seem to find it. That's Ajax. It's as complicated as it gets. If you understand Ajax, if you understood everything I said, that's as complicated as it gets. Does anyone have anything specific that maybe I skipped or didn't explain properly? Anything specific to Ajax? Is Ajax an exam? On exam? Could be. Okay. 2018 question tree. Let me have a look. What's question tree? Yeah, I'll go over that after animations. Right, animations are very likely to come up. Some form of animations comes up every year. I went over Ajax animations. The way you do animations. So let me open. So I'll make this code available once we're done. Animations. I was working on an animation. I didn't finish it. Keep this open. Right. Animations. How do you do animations? So animations are basically JavaScript events. Mostly you want to do animations when you're handling JavaScript events and timeouts. So this is very this is code I wrote just before we started this. So what I wanted to do here was just move this Minecraft dog when I press WASD. So if I press D, it goes to the right. If I press S, it goes down. If I press W, it goes up. If I press A, it goes left. And if I press both keys, S and D at the same time, it just chooses one. I didn't fix that. But you probably won't be asked to do something like that in the exam, to do like a multi-key input to move something like diagonally. It's doable though. So I took a similar approach with init here. So in my HTML, I have a div that contains this image of a dog, and you can see it has an ID of P. It has a source of dog.png, and it has some height. So height is just the scale of the image. So if I change this to 204, it will get very big. So I just said the 24 VH is just a unit. You can use pixels, but will get very small. So let's say 200 pixels. 200 pixels sounds right. Seems right. And then outside of the image, we have the div, and it has position absolute. So that means it won't be like offsetted by anything on the page. So if I were to add our div here, it won't affect the position of this div, even if I were to put some text here. So let's do it actually before this one. Yeah, so you can see it's not offsetting the image or anything. Yeah, so it just goes through the image. If I was to remove that, you can see the div that the image is in was shifted accordingly, so it doesn't collide with the text. So position absolute prevents that. It basically says this position is absolute, and nothing else that happens on the web page should affect the position of this particular object. Sorry, HTML element. And then you have left and top properties of style. So left is how far should the left border of this div be on the page. So the left border of the div is this kind of left, you can see this kind of square, and left border is this kind of line here on the left. So that's where we're setting the distance between this line here and the window. So if I set this to 100, maybe more than 100, 500, didn't work, did it? Was working. 20 pixels. I think I know why it's not working. Okay, so imagine I set 100 here. You can see that the whole square was moved to the right because we said that the left border of the div should move 100 pixels to the right, and you can see that's being reflected in the website. And the same if we go, we get the same thing if we do if we change the top value to 100. So don't worry about this. It's just because of how I have it set up. So we can see the whole square was shifted down to 100. So we're setting the distance between the top border and the window. So this distance here. And that's how we move our image element on the page. So let me set these back to 0. So I have this init function which gets called once the image is once the image is loaded on the page. And what it does, let me set this back to 0. What it does, it first grabs the div in which the dog is in. So there you go, div ID pdiv, which stands for player div, and that's the div the image in. And then we call update position. So the way I have it set up is we have some values here in an object. So this is what an object looks like. It doesn't have to be an object, but that's how I did it. So you can just do left is equal to 0 and then right is equal to 0, which I suppose might be slightly easier to understand. So I'm just going to change these. So objects you should be familiar with, but I don't think they're likely to come up on the exam. Does it work? It works. Good. Top and down is not working. Right, because it's top. Still not working. But left and right is working, is it? No, it's not working. Okay, I'll figure it out in a bit. So update position, what it does, it grabs the element that I pass into it. So what I'm passing in is the player div. So that's the element that has the image in it. I assign this to this variable called player div, and then I pass as an argument of update position. So basically, you want to update the position of the div every so often, and we do that with set timeout. So the way set timeout works is it takes a function, and then it will run it, and then it will wait a few milliseconds. So this is the syntax for a set timeout. So it will always take a function. So that means if we want to specify some behavior here that will run after some delay, we need to pass in a function, and we can do so. I use arrow functions here by defining a function inside of it. So we can name it anything. It doesn't really matter what you name it. The name of the function doesn't matter, because we never call this function. We pass it in as an argument, so it's kind of already being explicitly called. We don't really care about the name of it. Like, I mean, even if we try to call it outside of here, I don't think it will work. Okay, unexpected token here. Right, because this is invalid syntax. So you can see on code, temp is not defined. That's because this function only exists within the set timeout scope. Anything outside of it, it's you can't access it. So if we want to define some behavior for set timeout, which is essentially how we do delays in JavaScript, we have to pass in a function, and we don't really have to define it inside of set timeout. I could define it outside of it. So I could do abc some function here, console.log abc, and then I could do set timeout abc and 15 seconds, 150 milliseconds, and you can see like it still works. It's still displaying. It's displaying this. It's running this function abc that displays abc with a delay of 150 milliseconds, and the reason it's looped is because of this set timeout, which calls this function again. So that's recursion. The idea here that I want you to take away from this is that you can either define a function inside of set timeout, or you can define it outside of it and just pass it in. Make sure when you pass it in, we're not passing in a function call. So we're not passing in abc brackets. That's a function call. We're passing a function as a kind of an argument, as a value, which then is called inside of set timeout. Right, so back to what I have here. So we have this div and we have a dog in it, and we want to update its position every 60, say, milliseconds, or I've selected 16 here. So I've defined the position here as global variables, left and right, and they're set to 0. And once we load our website, I call this update position function that takes the div as an argument, and it will use these variables that I've defined here at the top to update the position of this div. So we have a custom function here, and all it does is it takes the left and top variables there from the top, these ones should be top. Already been declared. Not sure what the error is, and it is not defined. I'll just comment out for now. Interesting. We pass in the element as an argument, and then we grab these values and we change the style of the element to whatever value we have here, and then we call the function again. And the reason we do that is because we want it looped. So if I comment this out and refresh this page, and maybe let's do console.log and do 1. You can see we only get a single one here. That's because we update our position once, we then wait 16 seconds, and nothing happens after that because we don't call it again. That's why we want to call it again. If we call it again, you can see it's being looped, and we can change the delay of this. So if I change it to 500, it will run once. Sorry, 500 milliseconds. So it will run twice every second. If I change it to 1000, it will run once every second. So moving here to the right, but you can see the position is being updated only once every second, which is not ideal. So 16 milliseconds more like it. So that's set timeout, and you can really do anything with set timeout. You could do we could, for example, delay this update position. So if we want to do that, we can do set timeout. Now we have a problem because this is a function call, so we have to wrap it in a function. So function, call it a, and we put the call inside of it. We pass in the a. and say we want to delay for 3 seconds. So yeah. So if I reset the page and I press D, nothing happens. And then after 3 seconds, you can see we're moving. That is because I'm delaying the update position function that updates the position of the image by 3 seconds. So that's what happens here. We're delaying all of this by 16 milliseconds. And then once all of this runs, we call it again. We wait 16 milliseconds and it just constantly looped. So it's a very neat way of kind of handling positions and kind of updates to our image. Do note that like I'm not updating the style of the image directly. Instead, I have these left and top variables that I then use to update the position of my image using the update position function. Okay, so let's get rid of this delay here. That's set timeout. So that's set timeout, and I'll just go briefly over events. So there's two ways to do events on a HTML object. You can either specify them directly inside the HTML. So if I go to this div here, I can do on mouse down and specify a function. Maybe let's do on key down. No. Let me check. Key down. So it's on key down. And then the function I have here is on key down. So we can do it like so. And I'm not entirely sure if it's supposed to be a function as a value or function as a call. I've seen on the internet when I looked it up, I've seen like multiple like people doing both. So some people do it without brackets, some people do it with brackets. It works either way. At least it seems to be working either way. I don't know what the proper how it's supposed to be properly. I think Sam in his notes has with brackets, so I would recommend you do the same. Let's have a quick look just to confirm. So events, and then yeah, so Sam has on click move the van with brackets. So yeah, use the brackets. So that's one way of attaching an event to your HTML. So now when I press a key down on this div, it will run this on key down function. The problem with that is that I don't think it will work. The reason it won't work is because, yeah, so I'm pressing keys now, and you can see I'm not getting any behavior. I'm getting on mouse over, but no behavior here. That's because we attached it to the div. Whereas when I press keys on our keyboard, they actually happen in the whole window. So the div doesn't really pick them up. So if we want on key down, we have to attach it to the window object, and we don't really have an easy access to the window object. So we have to do it slightly differently, and this brings us to the second way of attaching event listeners. So right here we're grabbing the window object, and you can see it's not defined anywhere inside our code. That's because the window object is kind of a built-in variable of JavaScript, or HTML I should say, or both. So I do console log window. Because I did Windows. You can see we get like this whole object here with various parameters, and I think like all of our HTML should be here somewhere as well. So the window is basically like everything inside our web page, and the reason we do key down inside the window is because we're always focused on the windows, whereas we're not always focused on the div. Actually, I don't think we can focus on the div. So the focus is when you're kind of directly interacting with element. So if I have an where's my HTML here? I have a button, and let's make it a big button. Doesn't work. Still nothing. Width, make it 200 pixels. Will that work? That will work. There's our button. It's covered by the dog. There we go. So when my mouse is here, the element is not focused. But when I hover over this element, now it's being focused. And I can interact with it, whereas I cannot interact with it. So that's the focus. So because our div is not in focus, it will not receive the event of the key when we press it down. So that's why we attach it to the window instead, which is like all of HTML basically, in simple words. Let me get rid of this button here. And now if I press the key, so we have the on key down function attached to the key down event. And now if I press any key, the function will receive the keystroke. It will detect that a key was down, and we'll call this function here, which then console logs the key I've pressed to the console output. So I'm attaching two event listeners here. So one is mouse over. So that's when I hover my mouse over the log. You can see that it calls the on mouse over function, which all this function does is just console logs on mouse over, which is what we see in the console window. It's important to know that these event functions that we've attached to event listeners, they receive the event object, which we can display here. And this object contains various properties of the event. That's the window object. There we go. That's the on mouse over. So we can see we receive the X and Y position of the on mouse over, and some other parameters that we don't really need to concern ourselves with. So there is the client XY, and then there's just XY. They seem pretty much the same. So if I do event.x and I hover over, you can see I'm getting the X value of where I hovered over. If I do mouse click. No. Yeah, don't know what the event is. But the idea is most of these events have some kind of built-in properties that we can use to implement further behavior. So we could do left is equal to event.x. So now the left value will be set to wherever I hovered. So you can see every time I hover over the mouse over the image, it's kind of moving to the left. And now it's gone. So that's using the event object and grabbing the X value from it, and then we're just setting it to the left variable, which is then updated with our update position function. So yeah, it's pretty complicated. But if you wrote this on an exam, this would be actually fairly simple to write rather than something else. Okay, so that's on mouse over. Let's comment this out for now. And then, right. And then the next event I'm attaching is the one I'm attaching to the window. So that's on the key down. And it's as simple as whenever we press a key, output the key we've pressed to the console window. So you can see whenever I press a key get rid of this one. There we go. So, and the window objects as well. Whenever I press a key, we're getting the output of that key. And then we grab the element that we want to update. So that's the player element. I don't need to actually, because we're updating it. So you could update the element in here as well. So you could do something like dot style dot left is equal to +5. And then you don't need this. This is interfering. So if we get rid of these, you can see we still get it once. Is that all? Why is it only working once? One key down. Interesting. I think I ran into this issue yesterday, and there was a reason behind this. +5. All right. Is it working now? It's not working now. Interesting. Let's have a look. Left is set to 0, so it didn't update. I wonder why it didn't update. Not sure. It should work. Getting the element PID, pdiv, player div, style.left +5. Let's console log this. Player. How many console logs do I have? Let's get rid of this. And key. Player div. All right. Okay, I see. We're simply appending to the string here. Okay, so that's why it didn't work, because the style.left is a string. So when we do +=5, it just appends to the end of it. So if we do instead 5, if we just do 5 instead, or like 100, that will work. But then we can't really keep moving right. So that's the reason for these external values, because they keep track of how far we move to the right. So I suppose you could still define these and then just make this equal to left. And then on each key, you update these left and top values. And then you simply assign them. That works. And we're moving left, right. And can we move down as well? So that's left. Let's get rid of this and do top and top. It's already been declared. I don't know why that's happening. Player is not defined. Right. Move left, right, left, and up and down. Keys are being detected, but because we're not updating the value because I changed the name of it. There we go. So now we're moving down, right, up, and left. And the way we update these variables is we take the event that is passing as an argument, and the key is just saved under .key on that event. So we take our event.key and we check if it's D, A, W, or S, and then we increase we either increase or decrease the left variable and do the same for the top variable, and then we just update the style.left and style.top with these new variables. Okay, so that's events. Events are a mess. Animations. So animations you can do with window.setTimeout. I think that's an exam question, so I'll do that now, even more so because it comes up every year. Okay. Exam questions. So specifically the third one, was it? That someone requested? Let me have a look. Yeah, so 2018 question 3. So 2018 question 3. Let's have a look. Write a web page which, when it loads, creates an array containing 900 random integers, age between 1 and 50. Let's get started with that. So let's close this and open actually, let's create a folder here and do 2018 question 3. Okay, we'll create a new file called index.html. We'll create our head and body tags. I'll zoom in a little bit. And then inside the head, the script tag. Right, so the first hint is when it loads. So we need an onload event, and that will call our init function. And then script. And then we need an init function. So let's define an init function init, and just make sure it works. Console.log init. And I need to run the web server. So in our console, we should get init when it loads, and it's not. Right. There we go. So I put in the closing tag rather than the opening tag. And now we can see we get the init, so that means the page has loaded. There we go. So that's this bit. Create an array containing 999 random integers, each between 1 and 50. So when we load, we want to create an array with 999 random integers. So that's a for loop. So let's define a new for loop. And I'm using let. You can use var, same thing. I'm just going to use let is equal to 0. Then while I is less than 999, I++. So I++ is the same as I plus 1, or the same as plus equals 1. You can just do ++. And that will increment I by 1 every time the loop runs. An array. We define arrays using square brackets. You can also define them like this, but it's not a very popular method, I think. I haven't really seen it used that much. Square brackets is easy to remember. That's an array. So we define our array outside of the loop, and now we want to put random integers into it, and we want to use mat random. So don't worry about the range at the moment. 1 and 50. Let's just put random numbers in it first. So to append to array, we want to use push. So that will kind of push every new digit to the end of the array. So we don't have to index it. We could index it. We could do array I, let's do it like so, is equal to mat.random. And that will let's output it. That will also work. So we're just using the I as an index for the array. So at position 0, we assign a new mat.random value. So that's 0.7263. And at index 1, we do that again. So if we do console log I, you can see here that as we go through this loop, we go through all of these indexes, and then for each index, we put a random value at index of that array. That's kind of messy. I don't like doing so, and it's not very popular. Instead, you can just do array.push and then mat.random, and that will kind of automatically append it to the end of the array. So like if I, for example, put some values here, then this array.push will already kind of add new values to the end of the array. Whereas if I use this method, it will write over the existing values. So if I go here to the top, you can see my first value here is not 430 because it got overwritten. So we start our loop at an index 0, which is this one. We wrote some new mat.random variable. So if we do push and then go to the top, you can see you can see the two values we already had inside the array. So 430 and 403. We didn't override them. We added new values to the end. And obviously, if the array is empty, the first value will go like the end is the beginning. So we're just adding new values to the array. Let's define this mat.random as a new variable. So do num is equal mat.random random, and then we just put num inside the array and a function call. Yes, perfect. Right, so that's 999 digits. So that's the code for just generating random 999 digits. Now we want them in a range of 1 to 50. That's simple. That's very simple. So mat.random will generate numbers between 0 and 0.99999, like so. So we never get a 1. So the first thing we want to do is, since we want between 1 and 50, we can just multiply number by 50. So by the way, this is the same as numbers equal number times 50. And you can see now that all of our numbers are in a range of 0 to 49.99999, because if we multiply .9999 by 50, we get 49.9999. But we don't want that. We want whole numbers, and we want them in a range of 1 to 50. Right. So the formula for kind of bringing a numbers from a range from any range is x multiplied by x multiplied by max plus min plus minimum. So in our scenario, the max is 50. The minimum is 1, I think. Yeah. And x is the number we've generated. So that's the number. I'll rename it to num. And let's implement that. So the number is equal to number multiplied by max plus min. Is it plus min? I had to figure out yesterday. What do we get with this? I think it looks right. So we get 50.7. So that's obviously outside of a range. So with this, we'll get numbers in range of 1 to 50.9999. And we just then want to floor them. So floor will always round the numbers down. So math.floor. And that will round all of the numbers down. So if we get 50.9999, that will bring it down to 50. That looks all right. Let's do more of these. Actually, there's already a lot of them. I just want to see if I'm getting, if I'm in the right range here, which I should be. So what I'm just going to do is, if num is less or equal to 1, console log num, and then the same for the upper range. So if it's bigger than 50, we want to have a look at it. It's bigger or equal than 50. So we are getting 51s. I think maybe without them in. Normalization formula. Normalize numbers. And there is a formula for that I never remember. So it's a range of x. So it's number minus minimum multiplied by b minus a divided. We don't need to divide. Hold on a second. I had this. There we go. Number generator. That's not it. That's it. So I did math.floor multiplied by 1000. But that will get me in range of 0 to 14. Yeah, okay. Okay, I think I got that. So we multiply by the maximum. And that gets us in range of 1 to from 0 to this is getting in the way. So we're getting zeros and ones. Okay, that's awkward because we are multiplying by 50. So we're getting these high values 13 and whatnot, but then when we floor it, all right, because I'm only displaying bottom, and that's the 49. Right, so we're getting 0 and 49. So then if we just add minimum to it, yeah, so we're getting the 50 and the 1. So you multiply by the maximum and then add the minimum. So that brings us to the range. I'm checking for it here just to like make sure we're in the correct range. Right, so no need for this formula then. I guess I was wrong here. So just multiplied by max and then plus min. Okay. And it's supposed to be a floating point number, right? So we don't need to floor it. So if we don't need to floor it, hold on, no. That's just from at random. Integers, so whole numbers, each between 1 and 50. Right, that's what we got. Okay, good. So that's the first part done. Multiplier code size displays in a paragraph average, largest, smallest value of the set of numbers. So it's fairly simple. What we need is the average, the largest, and the smallest. So for the average, we need the sum of all numbers, and then we divide by the length of them. That will get us the average. So let's define a new variable called the accumulated sum. We start at 0, and then accumulated sum plus equals the number that we're on right now. So every time we generate a new number, we add it to our accumulated sum. Let's define a min number and set it to -1, because the largest number we can generate is 1. So if we set it to -1, we always max number. So if we set it to -1, we'll always, whatever number we generate first, it will be set as the new max number. So we want to check inside our if the number we just generated is bigger than the current max number. It's equal num. So what we're doing here is we have some max number that we're keeping track of, and then whenever the number we've generated is bigger than the current max number that we're tracking, we just assign the current number to the max number, and we do the opposite for the min number. So min number, whenever the new number we've generated is smaller than the current number, we assign the number as a new min number, and then we need to set it very high, so that because we're generating range of 1 to 50. So if it happens that the first number we've generated is 50, we want to set that as our new min. So that's why I'm putting it very high, so that like the first number we've generated always gets set as like the new min number. And average. So we can calculate the average just by dividing the sum. So the sum is here, so that's the accumulated sum divided by the length of our array. So our numbers are contained in this array. We can just get the length of it, dot length, and that's our average. So sum divided by length, and then we need to output these. So we need a new paragraph. Let's define it. We give it ID of P. And then we want to output our statistics there. So dot inner HTML. So we're grabbing the element, and then we want to change the insides of the element. So what we will do is min, max, and average. Let's start with the min. Min is equal to min, and then max is equal to max. Sorry, that's max number and min number. And then we want our average. Now let's see if it works. There we go. I'll just put these in new lines every time. So \n will not \n. It's HTML, not C. BR will put us in a new line because we're editing the HTML. So we can see the minimum, which is 1, the maximum, which is 50, and then average, which is roughly 25. So if we generate more numbers, that average will get closer to 25. At least it should, which is not. Okay, that's might be a little bit too many numbers. 25.5. Oh, it's because it's 1 to 50. So 0 to 50 would be 25, I think. Yeah, I think that's right. I hope it's right. It makes sense for it to be right. Right. So we modified our code so that it displays the average, the largest, and the smallest value from the set of numbers. Is there any cleaning up I need to do? Let's delete some of the spaces here. Okay, modify your code so it displays in the P the median value from the 990 values in the array. Note that the median of a set of values is the value which has half of the other values less than it and half greater than it. All right, so there are two problems with this. First problem is the numbers that we're generating, they're completely random. They're not sorted. So if I do console.log array, you can see they're not like in order. There's 1, there's 21, there's 23, 45, 18, and then we want the median. So that's like if we start on the left side and on the right side, we just keep going towards the middle, we want the middle value. So they need to be in order. Modify your code so it displays the median value from the 9. So I'm just thinking of the best way to do so. There are two ways, I suppose. The first way is you iterate over the whole array and you sort it using like one of the sorting algorithms, which would be probably kind of easiest conceptually, but most difficult to implement. Fortunately for us, there exists a sort function in JavaScript. That we can call on an array, and it takes a sorter function. So I'll just so we want to sort the array. So if we grab our array and do .sort, I don't think that will work. The reason for that is it will be sorted as strings, not as numbers. Or maybe not. Maybe it will be sorted as numbers. Seems alright. Okay, I need a smaller array. Get me 10 values. No, yeah. They're sorted as strings. So you can see it grabs the number and converts it to a string, and then just checks the first value, the first letter or first character of the string. So we get all the 1s, we get all the 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and no 6 because the range is 50. So that's bad. So if you just do sort, that won't work. What we need to do is we need a custom sorter. So we want to implement a function that will define how we're supposed to sort these values. So a sorting function, so let's call it our sort function. It will take two values. We'll take A and B, so that's the two numbers. And if A is greater than B, we want to return 1. And if A is less than B, we want to return 0. That's a V. And then if they're equal, so if they're not greater, if they're not less, then they must be equal. So no need for if. If you've got this far, they must be equal. We just return, sorry, that's -1, that's 0. So this sorting function will look at the output. So obviously we have to pass it in. This sorting function will look at the output of our custom function, and if it sees a 1, it will determine that A is bigger. If it sees a -1 as the return value, it will determine that A is smaller. If it sees a 0 as an output value, it will determine that they're equal, and then it will sort it accordingly, which you can see here that we're sorting it properly. So these 1, -1, and 0 values, they're kind of they're interpreted by the sort function. So if we sort, and there you go. I lost it. There we go. So if the return value, if it's greater than 0, that means that's B supposed to be sorted before A. If it's less than 0, that means A is supposed to be sorted before B. And if they're equal, so if the return value is 0, then that means they're equal. No need for you to know this. Do memorize this. So 1 means A is greater, -1 means A is smaller, and 0 means it's equal. And that's like kind of the easiest way to remember. This might be a little bit confusing here. So now that they're sorted, we want to get the median. So we have 999 values. So that means there is a middle, because if it was an even number, there are 2 middles, and then we have to we have to take both of them and average them, I think. But because we're generating 999 values, that means there is a middle value. Is there? There is, yes. So now that our array is sorted, we simply, so I'll move this down here. We simply want to get our median. So we do let median is equal to array. And then we want to get the middle index of it. How do we calculate the middle index of it? Well, we can just type in, was it 999? So that's 499 would be the middle index. 998 divided by 2. 998 divided by 2 is 499. So 499 on the left and the right. And then 500 is the middle value, I think. Yeah, so we have 499 below and 499 above. And then we can just extend this and say that our median no need for these spaces. Our median is let's have a look, 25. Yeah, that makes sense. So 1 in 50, the median will be 25. And let's generate 11 values and just make sure the logic is sound. So 11 values. So the middle value will be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This one, I think, 19. It's undefined, right? The reason it's undefined. So yeah, 28. Obviously, you can just calculate this. So you could do something like this index of 500. You don't have to specify it. You could probably do something like index. Actually, you can just do it inside of here. Could probably do math.ceiling 990 divided by 2. I imagine, or floor. I imagine that would work, but it might be not as obvious. So you can just do 500. Note the median of a set of values is the value which has half of other. So that's done. The mode value from the 990 values in the array. Note that the mode of a set of values is the value which occurs most often. A value that occurs most often. How do we calculate that? Yeah, that I think I have an idea. So we have 50, is it? Possible values? 49. We have 49 possible values. So we want to basically get their frequency. So we want to iterate over the whole. So let me bring this output down and just group this together. So this is for the median. This is from the average. This is the sum. This is max. And this is the min. We want to define a frequency array that will represent the frequency of each number. So at index 0, we'll have a number that will represent occurrences of 0 in the array. And at, say, 45 in this array, we'll have a number that will represent the frequency of the number of 45. So basically, the index of this frequency array represents the frequency of the number in our array of 999 numbers. And then we can just get the biggest frequency we have, and that will get us the mode. I don't know if in JavaScript there is a built-in function that will just calculate frequency. Maybe there is. I don't think that's what he wants though, but I'll look it up anyway. JavaScript calculate array frequent value. Let's see what the people came up with. Yeah, I'm not seeing any one-liners that you could just copy paste. Nope. No way around it. You have to write it up. So we have our frequency array, and then we want to loop over all numbers. An easy way of looping over an array without kind of indexing is you can do for element. So let's do for el in array, or sorry, of array, I think. So that will go over every single element in the array. So I'll do console.log element. And then you can see we're going over every single element in the array. We're only generating 999 numbers. Is there? Oh, I see. Okay, so if 21 is 19, okay, I see. Because they're sorted, so the output is being collapsed to like a single line to make it readable. And since they're sorted, like we get the ones, then we get the twos. So if it wasn't sorted, it will be like individual values that be displayed in this console log. So this for loop here, I've lost it. There we go. So this will just iterate over every single element. Obviously, you could do something clearer, such as let I equal let I, well, I is less than array dot length I plus plus, and then you can do console.log array of I, and that will also display all the values, but it's more writing, so like either of these is fine. I think this is cleaner and just easier to remember. So if you have an array that already has values in it, and you want to iterate over all values, you can just do element of array, and then each element is a number in that array, and it will be iterated over from index 0 to the final index. The thing is, you don't really have to worry like about how long the array is. You don't have to specify it. So then for each number that we find, we want to do +1 in the frequency array. So I wonder if this array is like not defined with zeros, if I do +1, will it like increment properly? Maybe, not sure. So frequency array at element plus equals 1, and let's have a look at it. Yeah, so because we don't have like anything defined in it, when we do +1, it just gets confused. So you can see like each of these numbers represent like each of these is like a number inside the array, and then these were supposed to represent the frequency of them. Let's do for let I equal to 0, while I is less than 51, because we need the 50 as well, I++, and then we want to set our frequency array at I to 0. There we go. So first we initialize this frequency array to 0, so we get all zeros here, and then we iterate over our array with numbers, and say like if this number is 10, then we go to our frequency array at an index 10, we increment the number under index 10 by 1. So that means the frequency of 10 is 1 plus 1. And then we can just get the maximum value from here. So we have our frequency array. There is an easy way to get maximum, I think. No, let's look it up. An array. There is a solution. So mat.max and then index of max, right? I think in the index of max. But it should still return a value. Why didn't it? Console.log max value. And none. Why is it a none? Length of 51. Obviously 0 has frequency of 0 because we don't have any zeros, but that's fine. I just wonder why this is not working. To get max value in the array. That's fine. We can always just do a loop. So we define a max frequency. We set it to -1. And then for element of array, so then, sorry, for frequency array. So we're iterating over all the frequencies now. And once again, you could just simply do this. That also works. Then you do frequency array dot length. And then if max frequency is smaller than element, set the max frequency to the element. Not sure why this didn't work. No, surely that's not because I used the const. Interesting. This should work as well. So let's have a look at the max frequency. If we get an output now, 31. Does that seem to be okay? There should be 31 somewhere. Yeah, there is. So 42. And then we want to get index of this 31. So this will return like the biggest frequency. And we want it from the frequency table. So in the frequency table, we want the index of, so the position at which our max frequency is. And that will be our mode. So let's double check console.log mode. And so this time it's 34 is the biggest frequency, and 34 is supposedly at 20. Yep. So that's our mode now. And let's just use let here just to not confuse anyone. And we can add to our output a new line, mode plus mode, and our mode is 25. So let's see if that makes sense. Yeah, so 30, I don't see anything bigger than 30 in here. Right, and that's the whole question. I wrote it quite, I took my time here writing this code. Also in the exam, so how he says modify your code, you don't have to like rewrite all of it. You can just add the modification. So like if you wrote, you know, this match and then you close it off, you can then write a paragraph saying inside this and this place add the following code, and you can just, you know, add like few lines. You can write down the lines. So like you don't have to write everything all the time. Just kind of present it so it makes sense. Like they won't be nitpicking about the kind of quality and the layout of your code. Just make sure that you understand what's going on, then they understand what's going on. And as long as whatever you did makes sense, it should be fine. So that's question 3. It's getting late. I went over Windows set timeout. I went over the question 3. Don't know how much CA is worth. Animations, you use Windows set timeout and switch the image every time. So that's similar to one of the assignments that you guys did. Let me find the assignment. Was it assignment 5, 6? Yeah. So every time you click, the image changes. So you do pretty much the same thing, but you do it with a window timeout. So you define 2 images. So you define your let image 1. You do some URL, or say a link to the image. So where's the exam paper? So like, for example, for this assignment, for this question, so that's when the user clicks it. So that's the same idea. That's pretty much the same idea. It's animation on click. So that's literally what you're doing here. So every time you click, so you have on click, you do cycle image. Except you're just changing the image. So you do let image 1, let image 2. So that'll be like just the source to the image. So .png. Let's have a look at what Sam called it. I have too many tabs open. He calls it bug1, bug2. Bug1, bug2, and it's .jpeg. It doesn't matter. I don't think you'd be penalized if you do .png or .jpeg. And then on click. So on click. Get rid of this. So we need some way to track which image we're on. So let's just do image value is equal to 0. And then if image value is equal to 0, let's grab our image first. So let image is equal to document.getElement by ID my image. So we're grabbing the image element, and then image.src is equal to image2, and then we have to change the image value to 1, or let's do 2 and 1 actually. It makes more sense if we do 2 and 1. So if it's 1, we want to change it to 2, and then else if it's a 2, we want to change it back to 1. And that happens on click. So that much of code changes your image. Very simple. So that's just on click of the image. And if you want to do it automatically, what you do is you add onload. You create your init function. You don't have to call it init. I call it init. Call it whatever you want. And then inside script, we can do function init. And we define our set timeout. So set timeout. Create a new function inside, because remember it has to be a function that we call. So I'll call it A, doesn't matter. And inside that function, what we want to do, we want to decycle the image. Let's call that. And then we want to loop. So we need to call init again. And add a delay. How often? He says 5 times per second. So that's 1000 milliseconds divided by 5. That's 200. There we go. And that will work. So that will cycle the image every 5 seconds. So we have the cycle image function that just deals with cycling the image. And it's very simple. You could probably make it like even simpler if you did something more advanced like objects or but I'd say in the exam just do simple stuff that you know works. And don't try to impress whoever's marking the exam. Just try to get as many marks as you can. Window set timeout. Does it need to be window that set timeout? Not sure. I think set timeout would work just fine. I could check. I don't have the images though. I can grab them. Let's do so. So let's make it smaller. Bulk 1. Paint. Grab that. And save it as bulk 2. Now let me go to my downloads because that's where I saved it. Bulk 1, bulk 2. And put in here. Now I want to run my web page. That's not it. I think it's because we're running this one. Let me close that. Gray solution 1. Close, trust. Now it should work. Okay, so it's doing something. It's not getting the images because they're PNGs, not JPEGs. There you go. Yeah, so I didn't copy it properly, but it works. And I wonder if you get rid of the window, will it also work? Yep, works just fine. And obviously we have like this initial image here. That's why we like at the beginning get a different image. So let's just change that. So when I refresh now, the first image is the bug. And that's like not really as much code as the third here, the third question here. It's considerably less code. I did skip the first part though. Define the term event handler in the context of JavaScript and the HTML. The HTML is dynamic HTML. No one really uses that I think anymore. In the context of JavaScript and the HTML. Event handler. Event handlers are properties that signify that certain condition was met, such as pressing a key or clicking on an image, and then they invoke the passed-in function to handle the behavior of that. That's how I would define it. It's only 4 marks. You probably want to write a little bit more than that. If you Google event handler in JavaScript, you'll find more. But that's how I would define it, like on the spot. Further modify your code so that the bug moves to the right across the screen at a rate of 5 pixels per second. So no user input necessary at all. So what we can do is just, it's the same rate of seconds. So wait, hold on, 5 pixels per second. So it's per second, not 5 times per second. So we need a separate function for that. So what we'll do here, we'll define a new function, call it fly or animate, and we'll copy paste this inside animate, and we'll call animate in here, and then we'll do another function fly function fly, and then I'll just copy paste this. And instead we want to move to the right. How do we move to the right? We need the image, or we can either do it inside of here, or we can just define another function like we did with cycle image. So let's do a function move right. Inside of this, we want to grab the image. So let image equal document get element by ID. The ID is my image, and we want to move to the right. So we need to change the left property. The left property is the position of the left border of the image. We need to keep track of it. So let's do left is equal to 0. And then we do left plus equals how many pixels? 5. 5, and then we update it. So image.style.left is equal to left. Let's do left position instead. So that will once update our image, and now we want to loop it. So we just replace this with move right, and we want to call itself again, animate. So the init calls each of these once, and then each of these call themselves respectively. So animate calls animate. So that's where we get the looping behavior, and fly calls fly. That's also where we get the looping behavior. And we do want to do it every second rather than 5 times a second. And it doesn't work. Okay, maybe I have to wrap it in a div. Let's just check if I do style left 100 pixels. Will that change? Left is not defined. Change this to left pause, right? This is not working. Maybe it needs to be position absolute. It might also be in a div. Okay, that worked. Position absolute left 100, and then so I'll set this back to 0, and it should be so log left position. So maybe it needs to be a div. Give an ID, the image, Still nothing. Left position is to console.log image. Left is equal to 0 pixels. I must have made a mistake somewhere. Is it just left? No, it could be. I had this working before in the other exercise I did. Where is it? Style.left. Yes, I'm doing that properly. Style.left. The position is being updated. Right. Now that works. It calls move right and then calls itself. This cycle's image calls itself. Unexpected token. Right. Let's get rid of. Right. I think copy position absolute. So that's something that we need. Will that fix the issue though? It moved once. Progress. I'll take it. Let's see if I can just manually move it. So that works. Well, the other one also worked. But why is it not updating? There's no style. I am pretty sure it's style.left. Element. I am grabbing the element. Get element by ID. That's the div with the image. Interesting. Must be a mistake somewhere here. But anyway, this would get you most of the marks, I imagine. I don't know where I made the mistake. It's probably something minor. Left position. We're calling animate and flight. We don't need this anymore. Yeah. Okay, it's getting late, so I'll wrap it up. I'll share this code. I'll see if I can fix it. This would get you majority of the marks for that question. You probably could lose like mark and a half for like not getting this to work. But like that's the gist of it. I'll try and see where I made the mistake in a bit. But it's getting really late, so I'll just wrap it up here. Right.
Thank you so much for the whole evening, man. It was really nice, really helpful.
Well, I did my best. It's the first time I'm doing this, so sorry if it wasn't up to the standard.
Sure, you're better than half the lecturers we have, so.
Yeah. If there are any questions specifically people want covered, like I have no problem writing up solutions to all of these, and then you can just memorize them. Like as I said, 70% of this is just memorizing stuff. If you can memorize it, that's half of the work. Tables, lists, CSS. CSS is usually just one question, so you can either learn CSS or just not do it completely. Though you still need some CSS for the animations here. So that left property, not sure why it's not working. I'll try to figure it out. Yeah, if people want, I can do another session Monday. I won't be able to do anything on Tuesday, but I can do another one on Monday if they have specific questions they want me to go over with. Yeah. Okay, so thank you. And do let me know if you want another one on Monday.
Sound. Thank you
Yep.
very much.
Take care.
Cheers. That's it.